I come from Latin America. I have lived in Denmark for so many years that I am also a part of that culture. We are third culture kids, is what they call us. You have to accept the new country the same way the new country is accepting you. I was born in 1958 and we were living in Haiti. We were very lucky, my brother and I. Both of our parents were professionals. My father was a doctor in public health. He worked for the World Health Organization. My mother also had a doctorate in soil chemistry. My father was pure white. My mother was mestizo, white and Indian. It was not a common marriage at that time. My mother came to Mexico from Ecuador to study and to specialize. My father went to the United States, to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. And while he was there, my mother's visa ran out and they needed to solve the problem by getting married. But my father couldn't come from the United States here for the wedding. So he gave a power of attorney to my grandfather. So it's a bit funny. There is a photograph here of my mother marrying my grandfather. In the end of '59, we moved to Colombia. That's when my brother was born. We lived in Bogota, in the capital city. And I remember worrying about my father because he would drive off sometimes for weeks, 2 weeks, in a white Jeep with the United Nations sign on it. And he would go to areas of the country where there was violence, where there was civil war. And 2 times he came back with a Jeep with shots. He had been shot at. We came back to Mexico every 2 years. This was my father's home. The family was here. So this was always home. The culture, the life, the food. We moved to Argentina in 1963. We lived up in the northwestern part of the country, in Tucumán, and it's also probably the poorest part of the country. There was guerrilla activity there at the time, but we were not, as children, aware of this. For me, Argentina was a time of playing, of learning. I was always a very curious child. I was always asking questions, and I think I was a lot of trouble for the teachers because I was asking too many questions all the time. We came to India for '68. I was almost 10 years old when we came to India. With my father's work, we were not living necessarily in the big cities with a lot of luxury. We were living often outside in the countryside in smaller cities. And we realized from the very beginning how lucky we really were that we were living in a nice house with water, with electricity. So I think from a very early age, we began to understand that not everybody was as lucky as we were, that not everybody had the same advantages that we had, and it became a natural part of our life to try to help. And in 73, we came to Denmark. 1973, I was almost 15 when we arrived. You know, as a young teenager, everything was new, everything was an adventure. And we were surprised by so many things. We came to a modern country, a very rich country. We were used to this ring of misery, a ring of poverty around every city that we knew. We come to Denmark and it wasn't there. The food was no tasting. We were coming from India with curries and chilies, and the Danish food tasted like nothing. The buildings were different. The houses looked different. It rains a lot in Denmark. Well, I remember being very surprised to see boys and girls 15, 16 years old drinking beer in the street. But for Copenhagen, it's pretty normal. Another big, very big difference is the religion. They have a bit of a negative picture of Catholics in Scandinavia. So being Catholic is not necessarily a good thing. It's not as bad as being Muslim, but it still is not a good thing. The culture shock for us was you go to the swimming pool and you have people take all their clothes off and they're walking around with no clothes on. That was very different. We were not used to that. We like swimming, but all of these naked people, that was strange. Oh, you know, it's like that here. The cultural differences made things sometimes difficult. I realize now that one of the things that made life complicated is that Mexican society, Latin American society, is very much man-dominated. But in Scandinavia, women or men are the same, and sometimes I think that it's women-dominated, the culture. And I was very surprised and sometimes uncomfortable with the way that the Danish girls took the initiative. And they are the ones who take you out and make you dance. And they are the ones who start a relationship. I wasn't used to that. Danish women really feel that they are exactly the same as men, that they can do the same things and they're entitled to the same things. And accepting that and learning to live with it was a process. It's not something that happened from one day to the next. It took time. The way that the Danish people can be very formal in the beginning, that was also a problem. In Italy, Sicily, they really they let everything out. In Sicily, you have one of the highest murder rates in the world. In Finland, you keep everything in and you have one of the highest suicide rates in the world. Scandinavians keep it in until it's just so sour inside, they cannot find a solution, they kill themselves. You can laugh about it, but it's a very real picture of what happens inside the person. When we came in 1973, the Danes were generally very welcoming, very open. A Mexican was exotic, you know? It was, oh, we've never seen a Mexican before.
The immigration to Denmark increased from 1966-67, when the economy in Denmark was booming. And Denmark needed workers, foreign workers mainly. And the immigrants were not called foreign workers. To make it sound better, it was called guest workers. So we made guests work for us. The situation today is entirely different. Political problem, economical problem, refugee problem, hundreds of thousands of people jobless. And you know, then people become people, human. Human egoism comes out, and then came political parties making things much more horrible than they actually are. And that's the situation of today. But it's not only in Denmark, I know. It's a global problem, actually. And in Denmark, which is a small country, that situation is very bad.
In the beginning, there was no effort made for integration. They didn't realize that the cultural differences, the language barriers, they were so big that it couldn't just happen naturally. You needed to make an effort to help these new people to integrate. And by the time the governments really realized that it was necessary, it was too late. But when we arrived, it was not so hard. We came from a different culture, we spoke a different language, but the people were very good with us. We never lost our culture. You can keep your culture, you can keep your language, you can keep your way of thinking, and you can still integrate. Inside your home, you have your culture, you have the way that you want to live. Everybody does. But the moment you step outside the door, you're a part of everybody else. You have to respect the country that you're living in now. Being a part of society is making sure that your children grow up together with the other children. Sometimes you find people that don't want to send their children to school because they don't want to have them spoiled by this Western society. They want to keep them the way they are back home. That's not fair to those children. If you want to keep things like that, go back to where you came from. If you choose to come to Europe, you cannot bring all of your country with you. There are things that have to change. Well, I wasn't a star in the school. I loved to read. My best time in school was in the library. When I finished secondary school, I was studying at university in France. I finished my university studies and I came back to Denmark and I was working in this Spanish bank. The banking world is very boring and it's all about money. And I wanted to do something different. But again, fortunately, I could speak several languages and I began working in tourism. First as a guide and then in the office. Eventually I got married. I had a child, my daughter Diana. Unfortunately, we got divorced, my wife and I, and my little daughter began to grow up without me. Things went well in the beginning, but then I lost the job that I had. But you can imagine for a young couple, just bought a house, the husband has no work, you get worried. Eventually, she asked for a divorce, and this happened in 1994. After the divorce is when I decided to come to Mexico. After the divorce, I really felt a need to find roots and a perspective. And I came back to Mexico because, after all, this is where I was born. I needed that distance from the family tragedy that it was for me to get divorced. My father had cancer. He came back to Mexico, and a few months later, he died. When he died, he left us a little bit of money. And my brother and I were both asking ourselves, what can we do with this money? We both had a university education. We could take care of ourselves. We could get a job, make money, be successful. What we wanted to do with that little money that our father left us was to do something that would make a change, that would make a difference. We felt that this gifts of money from our Father should be used not only for us, but for more people. What we chose to do, what we decided to do, was not the very traditional thing. So what we decided to do was to make a company, because the company would make a profit, and the profit from that company would be used for the development. In this way, we could maybe more slowly, but more stably, manage to make something and make it something that will continue. Well, we work with amaranth. Amaranth is a crop, a grain from Mexico, from Central America. The native people would make figures of gods from amaranth, and at religious ceremonies they would eat these figures. For the Catholics, it looked unacceptable. Also because maybe they were mixing human blood into these god figures that they would eat. Human sacrifice was common here. So the Spanish priests, they forbid amaranth, and it disappeared from the diet. We were the first company really to work with amaranth in the country. Because amaranth has such a good nutritional value, we have concentrated on making nutritional supplements for people who do not have the right diet. And so we work with food for children, with food for women who are pregnant, and with elderly people also. These are the most vulnerable people in the society, the ones who need the most help. I think that we have a very clear social difference. The white people, the maybe 8 to 10% of the population that you can call white, is probably the wealthiest, the richest part of the population. And then we have the mestizo, the mixed. They are in many ways the middle class. And then we have the indigenous population, the Indian people that are usually the poorest people, the ones with the lowest level of education, the ones with the most difficulties in integrating into the general economy. And yeah, here we talk about integration also, just like you talk about it in Europe. But the people that you want to integrate, this was their country 500 years ago. We are here in the field of Don Rafael. We expect to have from this little parcel here about 1.5 tons of harvest of amaranth grain. Our mission is to bring amaranth to the people, teach them how to grow it, how to eat it, how to transform it, so that they can have their own micro-industry around amaranth. So the way we work with the farmers in our area is that we supply them with the seed, we teach them how to plant it, we teach them how to harvest it, how to clean it, and we purchase the grain that they have produced for our own purposes, for production in our factory. We always try to apply a principle of fair trade. So we're actually paying a little bit more to the farmers than what is the normal market price. We are trying to transfer technology so that people in communities can make something similar to what we're making in the bigger factory. It is really a way of trying to help people to help themselves. So in this area, we call it the food bank, and here we are storing product that for some reason or another is not perfect for delivery to the customers. Usually the problem is the way that the sealing machine, here the temperature was too high, so the seal made the plastic shrink, and we don't feel that this is good enough to deliver to our customers, but it's perfectly usable product. So what we are doing is we accumulate things that don't quite meet the standard, And this is what we're using to distribute every month to the people of our community that need it and to other communities as well. How does what we're doing help? At the local level, at the community level, we are providing jobs. Work is one thing. Human development is another.
There's been a very big change in the community. It's a population of only 500 people, and they were very, very poor before we got there.
When we came to this village, there was no road, there was no electricity, there was no drinking water. We had to bore a well 450 meters deep before we found water. We're a very small company, but we believe in think globally, act locally. We understand the global problems, we cannot solve them, but we can try to work at our very small scale to contribute to a solution. And that is something that everyone can do. So here lies my brother. He died young, born in 1960, died in 2014.
They were always very close. They really loved each other very much. It's a great loss. It was not his time. We still miss him in many ways. He's an amazing individual. He was really an amazing individual.
My brother, he was more conscious, more aware of the poverty and the hunger and the misery. He was very intelligent, very intense. He decided that he wanted to follow what my father had done and become a doctor. And he also became very involved with philosophy. He started studying Buddhism and Sufism. And so when Benito finished medical school, he knew one thing for certain. He did not want to work in the hospital system. He wanted a more simple life, a more pure life, and a life in contact with people that needed help. Well, this is a very special place for me. We're now in the main square of Huixcazdhá, and here the people of the community have placed this monument to my brother, Dr. Benito Manrique de Lara. I'm sad. I miss him. But at the same time, sitting here with him makes me feel stronger and gives me more energy to continue with the work that we started. So it's 9 o'clock in the morning. The children of the kindergarten have been waiting here. They always wait in line until the teacher arrives. So here we have some of the books that the company has contributed. I'm very proud of what we're doing. I'm very proud of the results. 30 years ago, it was a completely different picture. Poverty, hunger. This is the first generation of the kindergarten, and some of these children are now actually working as supervisors in the company. You know, in Spanish, we say that soñar no cuesta nada. Dreaming does not cost anything. And in this spirit, we began this little library. So it's a little bit messy right now, but it's because we are painting, and it is workers from the factory that are doing the painting. But, you know, we have books for various ages. This is Community Learning Center, and actually workers from the factory are coming here to teach the children basic computer skills. The computers are a little old and they're not perhaps the most modern, but they work. So this is the primary school, and it's very well taken care of, just like the kindergarten. There is a committee here of the parents, and they are the ones responsible for keeping the place nice. For us, the family is the most important thing. Family is the only people that you can come to for help. You lose your job, you get sick, the family will help, not the government. So part of the mission of our project is to fight against poverty. One of the ways to do it is to realize that the small family lives better. So we have, from the very beginning, from 30 years ago, been working with contraception methods, trying to give the women the possibility to decide themselves if they want to have children or not. In other villages, you will find women who have 7, 8, 10 children. Here in our village, we have been able to keep it down to 2 or 3. This has also been a difficult thing if you think that the Catholic Church is against all of these methods of contraception. We have not had a single case of infant mortality since 1993. No child less than 5 years old has passed away. And we're very proud of that. We have accomplished something. My brother and I, through this project, we have made a difference for some people. My message to everybody would be that we are all the same under the skin. And we all have the possibility of seeing every person as a brother or a sister. And we can together be great. I see my job now is to make sure that the company is making enough profit to keep the whole project going. But I would like to find and train a young person to take over. And maybe in 8 years, 5 years, if God gives us life, I will be going back to Denmark. And not just because of the social system and the free medical care, but because my friends will be there. It's my home.